her piano, or maybe even the bathroom sink. We would giggle about this, Grandma would smile and shake her head. Oh, there's that pesky little boob. I forgot where I put her down at. This was shortly after she had a single mastectomy. She would laugh about being a lopsided old lady, but not once ever did I hear her complain about anything. The years in memory shuffled by, and I grew up. When I got married, I wanted an outdoor wedding at my grandparents' home in Nixa, and they graciously hosted and made that happen. A few years later, I welcomed my first daughter, Landry. The thought of cancer had faded into the background of life as I juggled being a busy new mom. The thought I was 14 years later after Grandma's diagnosis before the thought of worry of breast cancer would re-enter my life for the second time. This time, Grandma would have an irregular mammogram, revealing cancer had returned on the other side. This time it was more aggressive, but also this time the medical industry knew a lot more about treatment options and had made advances in breast cancer research. Grandma would have her second mastectomy along with chemo and radiation. I remember a few instances thinking she looked tired and fragile, and my heart would ache. I remember a particular Easter dinner we had to puree most of her food because radiation treatments had reached far into her neck and made it difficult for her to swallow without getting choked. Through each of those trials, that familiar sweet smile was still on her face. That ornery, independent attitude was still shining through, and we all held on just as tight as she did. About 4 years later, my Aunt Luann, my mom's oldest sister, would receive her breast cancer news. She was in her late 50s and had worked in the nursing field as long as I could remember. She had decided on a single mastectomy and a hormone pill for the next 5 years. Hers was caught really early and determined chemo and radiation was not going to be necessary. I had a sense of peace trusting her medical expertise and confidence in the matter and didn't worry too much. She had this covered. I was learning the women in my family were quite amazing and resilient, balancing the weight of the world on their shoulders with such grace. Fast forward to 2018, I was now a mom of 2 little girls. Landry was 8, my little one Lennox was 2. After 2 pregnancies, a handful of years of stress eating, and some rocky years, my weight was at an all-time high. I had been called pre-diabetic and knew it was time to get my weight under control so I could keep up with my girls. I was not willing to miss out on adventures together because of my weight, so I got busy. I learned about the keto diet, how low-carb foods actually helped me feel better. I taught myself about muscle training and the importance of cardio. I am proud to say, over the course of the year, I lost 115 pounds naturally. Man, what a huge life-changing accomplishment, right? That high was short-lived though. Everything happens for a reason because God was moving mountains in my life, and I was about to learn why. One ordinary day in May, I had just finished the workout at the gym and was heading into the locker room to change. My arm brushed up against a knot on my right breast I had never noticed before. It was concerning, completely stopped me in my tracks. My mind raced as I studied it closely in the mirror. Is that what breast cancer looks like? Surely not, I'm only 35. Maybe it's just a fatty tissue. I need to relax until I can make a doctor's appointment and see what they say. I looked down and stared at the body facing back at me. C-section scars, saggy extra skin, and deflated boobs that come with major weight loss and growing babies. For a few minutes, I felt very inferior, embarrassed, not good enough. But then it dawned on me. Thank God I lost this weight and stuck with it. Because if this is cancer, I never would have noticed it or found this lump without losing weight. The standard of yearly mammograms does not start until you're 40. This would have grown another 5 years before it was found by any doctors if it hadn't taken my life and spread before that time. Before I knew it, I was sitting at the women's clinic experiencing my first mammogram. It's really not as bad as everybody says. And that went so well, they decided to have me hang out a while longer while they prepared another room for me to experience my very first biopsy. Now that is something I would really love to never do again. It is not enjoyable, not even a little bit. A few days later, I was leaving my real estate office and meeting a coworker for a sushi restaurant for lunch. Our food had just arrived, and the time my phone rang. I looked at the screen as I recognized the phone number of my doctor's office. They don't give you bad news over the phone, right? They would call you and sit you down for things like that. So maybe it was a good sign, maybe it was gonna be good news. It was not. My heart sank. I sat there in shock, still balancing a piece of sushi between two chopsticks, as I heard words like carcinoma, invasive, and hormone positive. I thought about my two little girls at home. Landry and Lennox were just 3 and 9, way too young to not have their mom. After all, I was 35 and still needed my mom. I thought about my career I had just started. I was so proud of acquiring my real estate license just 3 months prior. Breast cancer did not fit into my life plate right now. I canceled the rest of my errands for the day and quietly drove home trying to gather my thoughts, processing this life-changing news. I picked up my daughter from summer school and struggled to find conversation. I wanted to tell her, but I also knew it was extremely important how I chose to handle the next conversations that needed to take place. I had just become the 3rd generation of a breast cancer diagnosis in my family. I was also by far the youngest. This was not a club that I wanted to join. I knew this meant my little girls would likely experience this too in their lifetime, so it was imperative how I chose to handle this, for your kids are always watching. I called my mom and asked her to stop by. I bravely told her and my daughters the scary news I had. Tears were shed, hugs were exchanged, and hours of research was done as I made my plan of what to do next. I decided the best fit for me was the KU Cancer Institute in Kansas City. They had impressive statistics and scheduled everything with urgency and kindness. The oncologist I chose happened to be my age. She had attended the same sorority as my childhood best friend, which brought me a little sliver of peace and very much trust in her. It was recommended I do a lumpectomy along with 4 rounds of chemo treatments and radiation. I prayed about it and researched survival rates and decided to go more aggressive and have a double mastectomy, chemo treatments, and skip radiation. It was only adding another 3% to my survival rate. The side effects just didn't outweigh the benefits to me. After all, it was all going to be in God's hands anyway at this point. July 1st, 2019, I dropped my girls off at my parents and headed to Kansas City to undergo a double mastectomy surgery. It was standard for the medical team to remove your sentinel lymph node closest to the lump to make sure it hadn't spread. This is when we found out it actually had. When I woke up, I was groggy and flat-chested. They put spacer bags in place under the skin while you heal, and let me tell you, those are incredibly uncomfortable. I know some of you women out there very much know that. It's a very bizarre feeling while your brain tries to process the idea of missing parts of your body that should be there. I felt less feminine, and that was a hard pill to swallow. My little brother and his wife lived nearby at the time and came in the door with big hugs and smiles to visit, and they were doing Jack Stack's barbecue. That was the best treat. Something comforting and normal. As we ate and chatted, I awkwardly shared my concerns and answered questions about boobs with my younger brother. When I got to the part where I explained the incisions where they were and that the doctor takes your nipples, I was visually getting emotional. I'll never forget the next moment. My brother, a rather quiet and burly lineman, cleared his throat and said, "Well, sis, Barbie doesn't have nipples either." So now you're just like Barbie. And that was the best thing he could have ever said. I was released to go home with drain tubes and collection bulbs attached to both sides of me. The drive home was a bit painful. 4 days later, it was July 5th. My parents had taken my girls to a family get-together to celebrate the 4th of July and my grandma's birthday. They were an hour away in Nixa. While they were gone, I noticed my left elbow seemed a bit stiff and swollen. My husband at the time decided it was best to get it checked out. So we headed to the local ER. After hours in the waiting room, it was finally my turn. They did an ultrasound of my arm as I watched the nurse's face go pale. "Hun, that's the largest blood clot I have ever seen. It reaches from your elbow all the way up to your jugular." A few other doctors and nurses shuffled in to look. "This could break off at any moment and go to your heart, your lungs, or your brain. You need to call your family in quickly. I called my parents in a panic and they hopped on the highway. I was frantic. I needed more time. I needed a second opinion. I wanted my doctor to guide me when I needed her most. I demanded an ambulance to get me to KU Med immediately. As they loaded me up and strapped my arms down, my parents rerouted straight to Kansas City to meet us there. It was 2 a.m. when I arrived. A team of doctors got me settled into a room and quickly hooked me up to tubes and needles and started a blood thinner drip while they decided the best way to handle this. The next morning, they carefully chose to keep me on blood thinners and see if the deep vein thrombosis would start shrinking on its own. They released me a few days later with handfuls of needles filled with blood thinners. I had to have a shot every 12 hours in my hip for the next few weeks. As I healed, I increasingly got more angry that God had written all this into my life's plan. It wasn't fair. I was desperate for something in life to just feel normal again. So I decided to get dressed and head to the gym. I needed it more for my head than my body. I tucked those drainage bulbs into my sports bra and was off. After all, I had plenty of room in there by this point anyway. The gym and my family support was about the only thing that stayed consistent in my life over the next several months. The blood clot did in fact start shrinking and eventually absorbed away. I wasn't able to have a port for my chemo. They were afraid I would get another blood clot, so each chemo treatment would be done via IV. I would not be able to have IVs in my hand or arm like most people, as my clot had been in my left arm and my lymph nodes had been removed from my right, so all IVs would be placed in my ankle. I lost my hair exactly 2 weeks after my first round of chemo. It came out in chunks. The day it got so bad I needed to shave my head, I called my best friend. Her and her husband came over that evening. We all took a shot of whiskey and got the clippers out. I even let my daughter Landry help so she felt like she was a part of the good, bad, and the ugly. I learned new skills, like how to wrap scarves around your head in fun, fashionable ways. I learned all about wigs, fake hair, real hair, and how it's actually really handy to be able to take your hair off and wash it in the sink. I also learned when you wear wigs to the gym, you sweat underneath your hair, and it just feels weird. It also does not stay attached so great if you're on the treadmill running, so we're ball cap fellow girlfriends here in this space. By November of 2019, I was finished with my chemo. I was tired. I was strapped financially from traveling back and forth to Kansas City every couple weeks. I was stressed about providing a happy and normal Christmas for my family that year. About this time, I received a letter in the mail from BFCO. A nurse had urged me to apply several weeks earlier, so I did. I opened the pink envelope to find relief. They had paid a few months of my bills on my behalf. My eyes welted with tears. Then I noticed they had also included a gift card for each kid so that they could choose something fun for their Christmas. Right then and there, BFCO found a place in my heart that I felt like I could never repay. By the end of the year, I had little sprigs of soft baby hairs that were growing back on my head. I had my final surgery to have those terrible spacers removed and permanent implants put in their place. I was gaining my strength back. I was taking it one day at a time. I had a strong urge to do big, amazing things with my life because I felt like I had earned a second chance. I hug my kids a little extra tight and kiss them twice before bed now. I offer grace and kindness a lot more frequently. I try to see the silver lining in all things. I came to terms that God wasn't punishing me at all. He gives his bravest people the toughest quests because he knows we can handle it, and he's given us the tools already to do so. I stand here today because of the strong women that came before me, the strong women that stand next to me, and the strong women we are raising and impacting for our tomorrow. Thank you to each and every one of you that came to spend your evening and your dollars with us to make a difference in the lives of those strong women, and the amazing men that support us and love us and help make our world go round.
Get it, girl.
Another round of applause.